It's surprisingly hard to pinpoint the very first piece of kitschy Christmas software made for home computers. You see, especially between the mid-1980s and the early 2000s, Christmas demos, desktop themes, screensavers, and such were all the rage. Video games too. And today, for this first episode of Retro Computing Curiosities, I'd love to share with you some of the bizarre winter or Christmas-themed games that I played as a kid, and a few interesting games that I found more recently. A lot of these are nostalgic favorites, and a few of them are downright awful. But either way, it's fun to take a break from looking at the more serious stuff, and instead enjoy some festive, spirited retro PC games. Lemmings is an amazing strategy-style side-scrolling game series that was around throughout the 1990s, with releases for both the Commodore Amiga and IBM PC compatibles. Even if you haven't heard of the series, the gameplay is probably somewhat familiar to you. A bunch of creatures called lemmings appear one by one on a board that needs to be traversed by way of assigning one of the lemmings a tool or a skill. They can dig through walls or floors, build staircases, or climb rocks. But be careful, because the rest of the lemmings will blindly walk forward into whatever pit or hazard lies before them. Psygnosis actually released a few of these holiday-themed Lemmings demos during the early 1990s, including a bizarre 3D version. But as bad as I am at these games, they've always been a great source of enjoyment, and a great way to reignite my Christmas spirit year after year. Not explicitly a Christmas game, this time killer from 1991 was originally released as a part of the Microsoft Entertainment Pack 3 for Windows 3.0. Originally developed by Chris Peary, this game allows you to slalom through gates, freestyle ski, or slalom through trees. Once you hit the end of any of the courses, you're pursued by the most terrifying monster in all of video gaming, the ski-free Yeti. There's not a lot of point to this game other than killing time, but it's honestly great at that, and it's something I've been coming back to year after year. Peary actually spent a decent amount of time continuing to support this game after its initial release. The game is now free to download from his website, and the updated 32-bit executable runs just fine in Windows 11. There's also a mobile phone port floating around, or, if you're looking for a more retro on-the-go experience, a port of Ski-Free was included in the 1997 Game Boy Color game, Microsoft The Best of Entertainment Pack. When I was much younger, one of the sites we would play games on was ezone.com. This site, by the creators of Lenny Loosejocks, featured a ton of quick and simple time-sucking games, as well as some absolute banger adventure games. One example of the former, though, is Santa Goes Buttboardin'. Oh no! Santa's dropped all of his presents, and it's up to you to pick them up. This 2D, ski-free style skiing game places you in the seat, literally, of Santa Claus as he buttboards down a mountain, collecting as many presents as possible in order to save Christmas. Turn left or right to avoid hazards such as trees or rocks, or perform a fart-propelled jump, thanks to Mrs. Claus's homemade fig and bean stew. If you don't collect enough presents before you take too much damage, Christmas is ruined and you'll have to try again. But collect at least 50 points before dying and Christmas is saved. If that didn't satiate your hunger for Santa's butt... Wait, there's gotta be another way to rephrase that. ezone later released another installment of the series, Santa Buttboardin' 3D. This game's a little different. Control Saint Nick in 3 dimensions around a small arena, collecting all 20 presents within the time frame. You can build up speed, even from stopped, and pull off tricks such as spins and flips if you get the angles just right, but wipe out and you'll lose a decent chunk of the surprisingly tight 2-minute time frame. It took me a few tries to beat this one, but I did have whole minutes of fun trying to get as high of a score as possible. There's a small measure of frustration with this impressive for its time but hard to master physics engine, and I found myself grinding my teeth more often than not as I would inexplicably wipe out while I was still trying to travel in a straight line. Still, absolutely worth a few minutes of your time. And while ezone hasn't ported these particular games to a Steam downloadable version yet, they are accessible on the Flashpoint Archive for now. This game, released in the early 90s for the Commodore 64, the Commodore Amiga, and MS-DOS, is strangely thin on historical context online. The game was apparently released and re-released in 1990, 1991, and 1992, although it is unclear from all the sources I checked what came out when. To make it even more confusing, the same developer released another game, this time a side-scrolling shooter, with the exact same name. Santa's Xmas Caper, though, was developed by English developer Zeppelin Games and is a side-scrolling platformer that casts the player as Santa on a mission to collect all the presents on each stage before the time runs out. But watch out, There are enemies around as well, which you can temporarily stun by using a well-thrown snowball. Alright, I've got to admit, I'm not a huge fan of the platformer on MS-DOS. However, there was another version released for the Commodore 64 that's more of a space shooter. I really love space shooters, so I've got the C64 Maxi on hand. Why don't we take a look at that one? This one, surprisingly, is more my speed. A horizontal shooter that plays unexpectedly well. I love the theming on what is otherwise a primitive space shooter, and the Christmassy tunes really help with the festive vibe. Elf Bowling was one of those games we definitely had on the family computer when I was growing up, but I had sort of forgotten about until recently. It seems like this era was positively rife with games about Santa losing his mind and going on a rampage, and this one is probably the era's best specimen. Santa's tied his elves up and forced them to serve as bowling pins during his insane power trip, but the elves aren't going to take this one sitting down. There are plenty of humorous visual gags and spoken insults involving the elves that keep this game entertaining even when the novelty of a mediocre bowling game has run its course.
Well, that's all I've got for today. But if you enjoyed this first video, I'd really appreciate a like and share. It'll let me know that I should continue making content, and I'd be happy to share some more retro computing curiosities with you. For now, happy holidays.